Okay, this is the true start. So I would like to welcome all our guests and audience to our conference Adventures of Identity from the Double to the Avatar. It is for me a great honor to have had the opportunity, the wonderful opportunity to organize this conference in this beautiful place. For me, it's a crowning culmination of a very intense period of research that I had the privilege to spend here as a fellow at the Institut d'études avancées in Paris during the last academic year. It was undoubtedly an exceptional chance to develop my studies in a highly stimulating interdisciplinary context with the help of my co-fellows and of the superb staff of the Institute. And I can assure you that it has been very hard to go back to my normal job, to the normal duties in Milan. And looking back, I sometimes wonder whether I was just immersed, speaking of immersive environments, in a dreamlike situation. I leave the room to Simon Luc, who is going to open our conference with a few words. Please, Simon, thank you very much.
So, hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Paris Institute for Advanced Studies. So, as Andrea just said, I'm Simon Luc, the scientific coordinator of the Institute. I'm speaking today on behalf of our director, who is abroad, so couldn't speak this morning. I just would like to say a few words about the Institute before I will speak about this conference that we're really happy to host today, and give you a few guidelines because we're in a very specific place and there are a few things to know. So what's the Institute for Advanced Study? It's a place, a research center that grants fellowships to high-level international researchers like Andrea in the humanities and social sciences. We give them time to concentrate on a project and to explore new directions of research. We like to think this institute as a place where ideas cross boundaries, scientific boundaries, disciplinary boundaries, cultural boundaries, because we have people from all over the world. And so it's a place of interdisciplinarity, dialogue, and we try to foster innovation in this way by giving the possibility to people to work and interact on a daily basis with people from other disciplines that they might never have met in another setting. This institute is supported by the city of Paris, the Ministry of Research, the European Union, and 10 research institutions of the Paris area, including the FMSH, that's co-funding this event today. We organize more than 100 scientific events each year, many of them organized by the fellows, like this one today. The particularity of the conference today on the adventures of identity is that it's the result of a collaboration between fellows from last year fellows from different disciplines: philosophy of art, literature, neuroscience, computer science, showing that here we have a lot of different people coming together and finding common themes to work on. It's also a collaboration between different institutions, so the Institute for Advanced Study, the FMSH, like I just said, the Istituto Italiano di Cultura, that I thank for their support. So as does the Paris IES, that's linking humanities, social sciences, the arts, and natural sciences, this conference intends to reflect on the way some ancient roots of our culture have evolved through time and are now reinterpreted today and used to make sense of the world, or create new ways to live and act in the world. The way humans play with identity is a vast topic from which an abundance of threads can be pulled, of course, to study a great variety of phenomena from the fine arts to the digital world through issues of law, medicine, as well as questions about consciousness, theory of mind, etc. I know you're going to touch all this subject today, probably not to resolve all the problems, but it's really a great task that you have in front of you, and it's a very rich conference, so I think you're going to enjoy it very much. And what better place than the Hôtel de Lausanne to study these questions, because as some of you might know, it's a place where Charles Baudelaire used to live, and he not only lived here, he also had interesting little parties with artist friends of his in the Club des Hachichans, where they experimented artificial paradises and they experimented out-of-body experience. So it's, I guess, one of the best places in Paris to talk about these topics. This building is generously lent to the Institute by the city of Paris, who's owning the place. It's a great place to work, but it's also a little constraining. So just to remind you a few guidelines about what to do and not to do, especially here. So when you come back from your break, which will be downstairs, we have a lunchroom. When you come back from the coffee break, please do not bring any beverages here because we cannot drink. We barely authorize people to drink water here at the table. So everything's very fragile. So don't touch the walls. Try not to breathe too much because because of humidity. I don't think that any of you wear stilettos, but if you do, please take them off, or we can put something on the heel so that it won't damage the floorboard. What else can I tell you? So don't put your bags against the walls. You can leave them outside. It's not a problem. We've shut these curtains. Please do not touch the other ones, as everything is so fragile. After the lunch break, the conference resumes at 3, and we'll open the gates at 2:45. So when you're leaving, just know that it's no use to come too early because you'll find a closed gate at the entrance. I guess that's it. Unfortunately, you won't have access to the other parts of the building, which are even more fragile than this room. But nonetheless, I hope you'll enjoy this conference, and I'm very proud to host this event, and I just wish you very productive discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, for your kind words. I also want to express my gratitude to the Institute. At the time when I started conceiving this project, this meeting was directed by Gresti Myrdal and now by Director Sadi Lalou. I want to thank the Institute for having generously supported the organization of this meeting, together with the fundamental contribution, as you have already mentioned, of the two partner institutions, that is the Istituto Italiano di Cultura in Paris, directed by Fabio Gambaro, and the FMSH, the Fondation Maison des Sciences de l'Homme, in the persons of Marta Craveri and Sara Guindani, who is also among our speakers in this conference. As you can see from the program, I have intentionally resisted the temptation of composing our sessions according to interdisciplinary divides. In full compliance with the interdisciplinary spirit which governs the Institut d'études avancées, our meeting, I hope, will benefit from mutual interactions, intersections, and perhaps also short circuits. The first opening session was, so to say, the epitome of this approach, bringing together two internationally renowned scholars belonging to two very distant disciplinary fields. Professor Charles Malamud for Indology and Professor Alain Berthoz for Physiology. So, Indology and Physiology so to say, to exemplarily indicate the wide spectrum of our working perspective. Unfortunately, Professor Malamud informed me early this morning that he is not feeling very well today, and he will therefore not be able to attend. We will all miss him very much, and we wish him a prompt recovery. So I'm afraid I will give you a longer introduction than expected, and then I will leave the room to my friend Alain Berthoz, and after his paper we will have a short break, and then we will have the session of questions and answers and discussion led by Federica Cavalletti. So I will start by telling you how the idea of organizing a conference on the adventures of identity began to mature in my mind. My research project here at the Institut d'études avancées concerned and still concerns the virtual immersive environments and the way they are radically changing our experience of the images and perhaps our experience in general. So when you wear a head-mounted display, le casque, you are not allowed to, oops.
Holy heck!
So it works.
I can lean over now and check everything, but that looks incredibly realistic. The lighting in Unreal Engine 4 is amazing. Your logo here. You can advertise yourself. I should put a Jacksepticeye logo there if I can, if I was any good at it.
So what happens in these environments? These are environments in 360 degrees. You are not allowed to enjoy a very simple but also a very crucial freedom. You cannot switch your gaze from the image to what is not image, to reality. Anywhere you turn your head, if you are wearing a head-mounted display, there are images. Images to be seen. And what appeared to be so obvious that I didn't even have to explicitly remark this feature, namely that one could look beyond the frame of a painting, focusing on the wall, or beyond the borders of a cinematographic screen or a computer screen. You are at the cinema and you can focus on the toilet door instead of focusing on the screen. This possibility, this freedom is now, in this kind of experiences, no longer possible. There isn't but image. This very elementary, very simple, but at the same time decisive, I think, condition is not without consequences. The very experience of the image, at least for our Western culture, has been based along the centuries on the possibility to distinguish what is image and what is reality. Now this possibility is strongly reduced and ideally cancelled. If you consider the fact that virtual immersive environments promise to become the standard way to experience images in the near future, because the devices become increasingly cheaper, increasingly lighter, increasingly user-friendly, we must expect in perhaps a few years a generation of native immersive subjects, just as we have now a generation of touchscreen natives. In the 30s of the last century, Walter Benjamin prophetically spoke of a tactilization of the image, a tactilization produced by the invention of photography. Images started to become objects of manipulation, palpation even. Benjamin died in 1940, so he could not see with his own eyes what we nowadays can easily experience looking at our kids. For them, an image is not so much an object to be looked at, but rather an object which is digital but digital in the etymological sense of the term, from digitus, the Latin word for finger. It is something which you can magnify, you can reduce, you can turn, you can open, you can close, using your fingers. It's a manipulable object. This situation, I think, teaches us something pivotal. A technological development can definitely impact on our senses, on our sensory constitution, redistributing the functional roles played by the different sensory channels. Human beings are naturally technical beings, or vice versa, if you prefer, they are technically natural, naturally technical or technically natural. Beings which instinctively and spontaneously prolongate themselves in tools and devices, in prostheses. And such prostheses interact with the anatomical level. They become embodied and consequently determine a veritable historicity of the human body and of the human experiences. An historicity which goes hand in hand with the history of technology, with the history of these devices. But a history is always told moving from the perspective of the present. A history is, so to say, a retroscopy, a looking backwards which cannot avoid the influence of the present, of its issues, interests, and desires. So if we retroscopically look back at the history of images from the vantage point of the contemporary virtual immersive environments, we realize that these environments seem to fulfill a very ancient desire. So general a desire that it might be perhaps defined as an anthropological universal, namely the desire of being in the image, of blurring the threshold which separates image and reality, the desire of erasing the borders dividing the iconic world from the real world. Here you have two representations of Narcissus, and of course Narcissus is a legend, probably one of the first displays of this desire. In one of the versions, you know that the most famous perhaps is the one told by Ovid, narrated in his Metamorphoses. Narcissus wants to join the object of his desire, but he is not able to, and so he leaves himself die on the border of the river, and from the putrefaction of his body, the beautiful flowers, the white and yellow flowers, Narcissus exactly, are produced. But there's another version narrated by Plotin in his Enneads, which says that Narcissus dies because he dives into the water. He immerses himself in the water and he drowns. So we could speak of Narcissus as a proto-immersant figure, a proto-immersant subject. But of course this idea of entering the image, of being in the image, has been represented in many anecdotes. For example, in the anecdote narrated by Pliny, among others, Xerxes, the famous Greek painter of the golden age of Pericles, he was able to paint a bunch of grapes in such a realistic way that birds would come down from the sky and try to peck directly the grapes. So the birds did not have the conscience of the image. They thought that those grapes belonged to reality. There was no division, no separation, there was no threshold between the space of reality and the space of the depiction. If you look at this advertising of the Samsung LED of some years ago, I don't know if the author of this advertisement was aware of Pliny and his natural history and the anecdotes, but you can easily see the longue durée, the long history, the long duration of this idea of birds entering the image. Birds, but only human beings. Also, the history of cinema has explored in an intense way this idea of trespassing the threshold between image and reality. You have this example here in this movie by Buster Keaton, in which he is a projector and in a dreamlike, in an oniric situation, he dreams of trespassing the line dividing the reality of the room from the representation on the screen. It's a wonderful reflection also on what is shared by theater and cinema, and what, on the contrary, constitute a radical difference between the two environments. And here it goes. And it is in the image. One might wonder whether this kind of desire belongs to our Western culture, or it is possibly a universal desire. I have spoken at the beginning of an anthropological universal as an hypothesis. Surely in Chinese culture we have very similar anecdotes speaking of painters who enter their own image. This is the history of Wu Daozi of the Tang Dynasty, a painter who actually existed in the history of Chinese painting. And he received a commission by the emperor to paint a wall of the palace. And when he had finished his painting, he called the emperor to admire his work. And while the emperor was contemplating the painting, Wu Daozi just entered it, turned, said goodbye to the emperor, and just disappeared forever in the painting himself. But there are, of course, many other examples of the contrary movement, because once you have trespassed the threshold and you are allowed to enter the image, you should of course expect the contrary movement, that something comes out of the image. And it is very famous what was told about the first projection of the film by the Lumière brothers, The Arrival of a Train in La Ciotat, that people in the theater panicked and escaped from the theater because they were afraid that the train could hit them. This is of course a legend, but it is also interesting that this kind of legend could inspire many films of the early age of the cinema. The idea of a train coming out of the screen and impacting on the audience became a veritable topos in the history of early cinema. This is one example, but I have no time. Eisenstein as well, when he had programmed the first projection of the battleship Potemkin, he had imagined that the nose of the battleship could actually and concretely enter the theater and break the screen. So a kind of eruption of reality into the room. Some of you might have thought this example of Woody Allen, which is a kind of homage to.
You know, I still can't get over the fact that 24 hours ago I was in an Egyptian tomb. I didn't know any of you wonderful people. And here I am now. I'm on the verge of a madcap Manhattan weekend. My God, you must really love this picture.
Me?
You've been here all day, and I've seen you here twice before.
You mean me?
Yes, you. This is the 5th time you're seeing this.
Henry, come here, quickly.
I gotta speak to you. Oh, God! Listen, old sport, you're on the wrong side.
You're on the wrong side, but not all actors have the privilege to be able to trespass the threshold, because when another actress tries to follow him in reality, she finds a barrier not allowing her to have access to reality. This topos has been exploited in different media, for example by David Cronenberg for the television in Videodrome, and I don't know if you have seen this recent advertisement by Espresso Company.
I've slain your dreaded dragon.
For saving the kingdom, what doth thou desire? Where are you going? My lord! Hey! Good night! Where are you going? Well, that's never happened before. I mean...
Taxi!
Climbing up on South Street Hill, I can see the city light. Writing things I've come to do, Holly.
Exceptional coffee is always worth the quest. Nespresso.
Do you break a farthing? 'Tis all I desire.
Didst thou bring enough for the whole kingdom?
Espresso. What else?
I don't think that Nespresso is the kind of coffee that we serve here at the Institute. So we won't have this experience today. So why this introduction on this problem of ideally erasing, or at least strongly blurring the threshold and the separation between image and reality, and this desire of being in the image? Because of course, the very central topic of our conference, that is the avatar, the double and the avatar, from the double to the avatar, directly concerns precisely this idea and this experience, because the avatar evidently plays in this context a crucial role. The avatar allows us to be in the image. It is nowadays mostly encountered as the digital proxy, a virtual surrogate or substitute of the self. You have an example here of, which is almost archaeological, of Second Life.
Oh no, what to do? Fuck, no. Harry Styles is taking me. Sauce. Sorry about it. I don't know where the hell I'm going. I'm just...
But far from being a term coined in contemporary times, the notion of avatar is rooted in the ancient Hinduist tradition. The Sanskrit term avatar refers to the descent on earth, the material appearance, the sensible manifestation or incarnation or of a god or goddess, mostly Vishnu, as you have here. And the paper of Professor Malamud should have precisely addressed this topic. In Western culture, the notion of avatar has come to be associated with related notions such as the double, as I said, the alter ego, the doppelganger. Although its first occurrences in Western languages can be traced back to the 18th century, the fortune of the term is due to the massive fortune of this film by James Cameron, although there was already a video game called Avatar in 1979. Manifold transdisciplinary issues are raised by the experience with the avatar, and this is why this place is perhaps a very good place to address these interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary issues. From the angle of the history of images and of visual culture studies, it constitutes, of course, a fundamental chapter in contemporary visual practices, but it also represents a significant variation of the genre of the portrait and self-portrait, which can hybridize as well with the production of the selfies in recently released animojis by Apple. From a philosophical, anthropological, sociological perspective, the avatar impacts on fundamental questions related to identity, as Simon said in his introduction, subjectivity, intersubjectivity. From a psychological, psychoanalytical, and neurological point of view, it is linked to questions such as multiple or split personality, embodiment, body ownership, self-representation, proprioception, prosthetic implementation, empathy, and I think that Alain will speak of empathy as well. But we have, of course, the vantage point of new technologies, media studies, because the avatar in this context represents the digital intermediary through which the user interacts with the virtual environment and other users. But there are also ethical and political issues. They are crucial for the avatar experience, since not only through avatars we operate in the digital world, but avatars can also reverberate their effects onto our real life, modifying, for example, our gender biases or racial biases. In the political sphere, we have holograms, which I think should be considered as a subclass of avatars, or at least as very strongly related to the avatar experience. And these holograms have been used in significant occasions as new forms of political subjects, of political identity. For example, by protesters in Madrid in 2015, in order to bypass the governmental prohibition to demonstrate against the citizen security law. Bodies of protesters could not be actually there in the streets, and so they decided to be there in their holograms. Or, for example, by candidate Mélenchon during the French presidential campaign in 2017, he wanted to simultaneously appear in 7 different cities.
C'est incroyable. Alors où suis-je? À Lyon? Et maintenant, à Paris.
So, as we see from these examples, we have a spectrum here, because the avatar can tend to a mask, and so to a dissimulation of our identity, a presentation of ourselves in different visible features, but it can also be a substitute in the opposite direction of an imitative simulation of our body. So we have here really a polarization of masking and dissimulating on the one side, and of simulating our identity and multiplicating it on the other side. Social networks are interested by avatars. Facebook has begun the beta testing of its virtual immersive environments, which is called Spaces, last year.
Hey sis. Hey Jack. Are you all excited for our trip?
Yeah, and look what I found.
This is so cool. Is this the same spot we're going to?
I hope so. And look, I think that's where we're taking the boat tour.
Oh, I love it. Look, I'm gonna go chat with Melissa, but you're setting up the party room, right?
Yeah, I got it.
Great. See you later, Jack.
All right, see you later.
Bye.
This is very new, but apparently the tendency to make avatars is embedded in the very nature of human beings. Just as the immersive drive can be traced back to the non-historical dimension of myth, as we have seen with the legend of Narcissus, the avatarial presence in the broadest sense of the term, presence of the self in the image. I think it can as well be detected as a strategy which has been in force since at least the Upper Paleolithic period. For example, in these hand stencils. The techniques vary. The hands could be either painted, mostly in red, white or black, and then applied to the surface of the rock. It's a positive handprint, or the hand was placed on the rock and its silhouette was emphasized by spraying pigment through a tube or by spitting the paint from the mouth. And this is the case of the negative hand stencil. But we are speaking of images dating almost 40,000 years before the Common Era. So it's really amazing, and I think that, of course, we do not know much of the ultimate reasons which motivated such manufactures, but I think it does not appear totally far-fetched to read them as partial avatars of the prehistoric self, iconic representatives of the human body in its archaic identity. An archaic identity which could allow self-recognition and at the same time self-duplication, sort of archaic prototype of Jacques Lacan and his mirror stage. A mirror stage with which this hand stencil shared the lateral reversal, so that the right model hand appears on the rock as the left picture hand and vice versa. And the flickering lights of the torches must have added the proper cinematic dynamization to the wall, to the whole. From such mirroring of the self to the practice of self-portrait and selfies, it is perhaps not too much of a leap. It is certainly a leap from the point of view of chronology, but it is just one step away, I think, from a conceptual perspective. Here you have what is usually considered, conventionally considered, of course, one of the first self-portrait, a sculptor in ancient Egypt who represented himself together with his wife as a presence of the self in the image, looking at the sculptor outside. So you have this moment of doubling, of duplicating, and of reflection. And of course, from here through the centuries-old tradition of the self-portrait genre to our contemporary selfies, to our obsession to be in the image. Avatars, I think, are there. At least it is a constellation of cognate experiences. I'm not saying this is the same as the digital avatar in video games, but I think that here we need to explore possible analogies and possible relationships. Avatars need necessarily the reflection of the identity, its doubling, which allows both the split between the self and its representation on the one side, and their connection or even identification on the other side. So on this reflection, both in the sense of a thought and in the sense of a mirroring, I wish to conclude my introduction and to leave the room to my friend and colleague, Professor Alain Berthoz. Thank you very much, Alain.